So far in our series on the Big O characters, in our retrospective here, we have seen a man who obsesses over the truth, and a man who says there is no sole truth. But what of a man who tries to create the sole truth? That man would be Alex Rosewater, the leader of Paradigm Corporation, and by extension Paradigm City. Now Big Al's place in the story is one which evolves over time. He's first introduced in passing in episode 4, literally about 6 or 7 frames if I remember, and he slowly starts to feature in more episodes and makes it known how dominant he is. He doesn't care for others, and around episode 13 he concludes a deal with the Union which involves him selling out the city for Big Foul. Eventually, around episode 20, Alex becomes a main character, crosses the Union, and asserts his dominance as he fights the Union using Big Foul. Big Foul then refuses him, but Alex figures a workaround using Dorothy's memory core. He then seeks to create a new world order using Big Foul's power, but is ultimately foiled by Roger, Dorothy, and Big O using Big O's patented Mega Dong cannon. Finally, Big Al meets his end when a Big Venus comes up to him and says, "It's time to tap out, buddy." She doesn't actually say this, but I thought it'd be cool. Anyways, back to the script. Now when I type my scripts, it's usually a pretty free-flowing process. You get a stream of conscious going and it gets typed out and then organized and refined. A lot of the time, a lot is said and gets cut down and refined to a more coherent and cohesive form. Rosewater was the exception to this process, however. I felt like I had a vague idea of what I wanted to say, but never quite got there. And then it hit me. It's probably for a reason, and I think I've identified the reason, and, by extension, his main character. You see, the reason being is that Rosewater's character in itself felt incomplete. I do not mean to say he was lacking a goal or point or humanity, like, say, Alan Gabriel, but that he didn't seem like quite a fully mature man. A complete human, if you will. Now, Rosewater is at least 30, judging from his appearance, so I don't mean this in a literal sense, but in a more metaphorical one. He does not come off as someone who has had the necessary experiences to mature him into a good man, or really even a functional human. This guy, if he wasn't the head of Paradigm Corporation, would probably be seen as a bit of a weirdo, or, that guy. In fact, Big Foul proves this when it deems Rosewater not. That is, not worthy or complete. What I mean by this is that he comes off as immature and out of touch. He obviously lacked great hardship growing up and also seems to have a lack of discipline, as he has no sense for others. He lacks empathy and expects others to adore him for being him. At first he comes off as something of a regretless narcissist, and for this reason he comes off as, a phony. And this later transitions in Season 2 into a character who is either a man of grandiose delusion or a man-child compensating for something. Either way, he seems to serve himself only, and we cannot relate to him, because he himself lacks empathy for others, and it's obvious he's only serving himself. Now, I know I joked about it, but it is true that he is on top, and he expects to remain there, to be dominant. That, however, is his only real purpose, it seems, in his eyes, and that of material power, and it serves to alienate him. Sure, he's human, and even has, human moments, but is generally unrelatable and distant. This all goes back to his apparent disregard for others based on immature and insecure narcissism. But how can a man so dominant, a man that gets things done, be insecure about something? You might be asking, what evidence do you have for this? Well, I feel the evidence is present throughout the show. When Rosewater is first introduced, he is portrayed as cold and calculating, a man of business who is all about business. You can tell all this from his first 6 frames. Once Season 2 starts, however, this is peeled back and we see another side of him. In fact, he feels like a different character, and part of me questions if this is intentional, inconsistent writing, or if this was something that was just kind of cooked up as they were going along. Either way, in Season 2 we see a lot more of Big Al, and can soon tell that he's insecure based on how he projects himself. He comes off as part psychopathic businessman and part spurred child, and these both show insecurity. He openly proclaims that he is a born dominus, a born leader, a born man of action and talent, a dominant man. But why would he need to assert these things if he knows them? Why would he need to talk to himself up so much, especially if he's already in control of everything, and everyone knows this? It is because he fears he isn't good enough or strong enough to be. He is someone who proclaims that he is the be-all and end-all to everyone, because he's afraid he isn't to anyone. And this leads us to an examination of his regression in the childlike states. In fact, the most interesting part of Alex's character I found was basically how later on he starts to swing between the moods of dominant bruiser and crazy kid. He is someone who is shown to be rather insecure about his heritage, and even, at times, comes off as just a child looking for attention. Watch how he fawns over Big Fow, his new toy. Watch how he literally makes a toy of Big Fow. Watch how he panics when it stops working. Watch how impulsively he makes a deal with the Union. For Big Fow. None of these decisions are purely logical, and it's clear that there's some kind of emotional component present. He does all these things for himself, so that he can feel some sort of love or attention. Anything to fill the hole inside of him. The metaphorical hole. He wants to make his own truth and define it for others, because he is afraid of the current truth, and he's afraid it doesn't favor him. But what is the current truth haunting Mr. Rosewater? That truth is that he is afraid that his heritage is not what he thinks it is, or hopes it is. He is afraid that Gordon Rosewater is not his true father, even if they love each other as father and son. You see, Alex is afraid that instead of being Gordon's true biological heir, he is merely one of the youth Gordon implanted with memories referred to as tomatoes throughout the series. This would be disastrous in Alex's mind, as it would mean that he, in his view, is not Gordon's true son, and therefore not entitled to all he currently has. He is not as good as he thinks he is. In fact, he would be nothing, since all his power is stemming from his inheritance, and all he knows is his power. And this idea, that someone is nothing, is crushing for anyone, not just domineering and busy businessmen. I would say that fear that someone is meaningless is actually very normal and justified, and that's why everyone seeks to give life meaning through interpersonal interactions, relations, professions, hobbies, and any other things. People seek to give their life meaning and establish their own truths, and modify into truths around them, adapting the ones they can't change and growing as a person along the way. No one wants to be meaningless, and Alex Rosewater is afraid he is. However, the only solution he's ever known for anything is power. This is because he's been raised in a position of power. Blunt power is the only thing he knows, so he concludes he must use his powers to prove his fears wrong. He must prove his meaning by asserting his dominance over the truth, and by creating a new truth of the world. It is not so much to do so over others, but over the nagging insecurities he has over his birthright. He must prove himself to himself, but unfortunately lacks the self-awareness and self-esteem to do so in a healthy manner. Instead, he embarks on an ego quest to bend the truth and the world around him, instead of learning the truth and the world and adapting to them. In the end, he pays for this when Angel, as Big Venus, effortlessly taps him out of existence. The irony is clear here, as the most dominant man in Paradigm was simply tapped out of existing. The moral is also clear. Seeking only worldly power and power over others is unhealthy and will earn a just punishment. While the Big O tells people they must pick, choose, make, and modify their own truths, they cannot simply rely on power, and cannot simply rely on trying to make all of their truths. That is not to make him out as an Alan Gabriel, however, and I would like to take a second to distinguish between the two. You see, Alan has no truth. He's selfish out of a psychopathic disregard for basically anything, and lacks humanity as a whole. Alex, on the other hand, struggles with the truth, and therefore acknowledges its existence, but is selfish out of some kind of compensatory desire. He wants to compensate for his insecurities, and he does show emotion. As noted earlier, Alex is still very human. It's just that he shows traits of humanity which are not so desirable, you know. I would also like to note here that while it may seem like I'm trying to throw Big Al a bone here, I'm not. He's still a very unlikable man, and I don't think I'd want to hang out with him. And he got what's coming to him. I do think it fitting, though, that, ironically, the most dominant man in Paradigm could never dominate his own insecurities.